At the elderly doctor's office, I said my last name. His face went pale in an instant, and he asked sharply, "Your husband isn't, by any chance, Andrei Sorokin?" I blinked, surprised. "Yes. Why?" He averted his eyes and whispered, "No time to explain. You'll understand soon enough." Irene was 52, and she had long stopped expecting surprises from life. Every morning followed the same ritual: alarm at 6:30, a strong cup of coffee with milk, a cheese sandwich, while the city outside slowly woke. Her 3-room apartment in the city center, with its high ceilings and old creaking parquet, had been in her family for generations. She loved this place. It smelled like home, warm, real, familiar. The kitchen still had the same floral curtains her grandmother had hung 30 years ago, and Irene could never bring herself to replace them. On the windowsill, pots of violets thrived beside an old radio she turned on out of habit, even though she hadn't listened to it for years. Irene drove to work in her silver Toyota, bought 5 years ago. She was the chief accountant at Europromtech, a major manufacturing company producing parts for construction machinery. 23 years in the same organization. She started as a simple accountant, worked her way up to deputy, and for the past 8 years had managed the entire finance department. Colleagues admired her precision and calm demeanor. Her boss, Gennady Petrovich, a heavy-set man with a perpetually loose tie, often said, "Irene Pavlovna is our foundation. As long as she's here, I sleep easy." Beyond the apartment, she had a small wooden dacha 40 kilometers outside the city with a 600 square meter plot. Her parents had bought it in the 1980s, back when companies distributed dachas. Her father, Pavel Grigoryevich, spent every summer crafting something: a gazebo, a new porch. He had passed away 12 years ago, but the gazebo still stood, slightly tilted, with carved railings he had made himself. Her mother, Zenaida Fyodorovna, was still alive, 74, living alone across the city, but calling Irene every evening at exactly 7. Irene had divorced her first husband when she was 42. Sergei wasn't a bad man, they had simply stopped seeing each other. He would come home from work, eat dinner, sit at his computer. She would come home, eat, sit over her reports. Weekends were quiet. One morning at breakfast, Irene realized she couldn't remember the last time they'd had a real conversation, just the two of them, not about bills or repairs. The divorce was quiet, without drama. They split their property, shook hands. Sergei moved to another city and remarried. Irene stayed alone. 10 years of solitude, sounding harsher than it had been. She wasn't unhappy. She had work, her mother, friends, the dacha. Saturdays at the market, she bought fresh cottage cheese from Tomra, a vendor who always set aside the best for her. Sundays were for visiting her mother, bringing groceries, cooking lunch. Summers were for tending tomatoes, cucumbers, and strawberries at the dacha. Life was steady, calm, predictable. Sometimes, in the evenings when the apartment fell silent and the parquet stopped creaking, a strange feeling crept over her. Not exactly loneliness, more like watching life pass by a train window while she stayed behind the curtain, too hesitant to step on board. Then Andrei appeared. It was November, at the birthday party of Svetlana, a mutual acquaintance Irene had once worked with. Svetlana had set up the party in her spacious living room, candles on the table, soft music playing. Around 15 people were there, mostly women, but also men, Svetlana's husband, a couple of his friends, and then Andrei, whom Svetlana introduced as an exceptional man, an engineer, by the way. There was something about him that made the air feel different, as if the room had shifted ever so slightly when he entered. He smiled, polite but calculating, and Irene couldn't shake the strange sense that her life, until this moment, had been waiting for him without her even knowing it. He was 46, but he looked younger, fit, medium height, neatly trimmed hair, and gray eyes that held something sharp and watchful. Back then, Irina mistook that intensity for simple attentiveness. He dressed plainly but carefully, dark jeans, a fitted turtleneck, clean boots. His hands were dry and warm. Irina noticed when he handed her a glass of wine. They ended up talking by the window while everyone else danced. Andrew spoke about his work, design projects, blueprints, demanding clients. His voice was calm, steady, never boastful. He asked about Irina's life, and surprisingly, he listened. Truly listened, not nodding absently while glancing at his phone, but looking straight into her eyes. asking thoughtful follow-up questions, offering a quiet smile at just the right moments. When she mentioned her summer cottage and her father's hand-built gazebo, he said, "Carved railings? That's serious craftsmanship. Your father must have been a man who did things right." And something about the way he said it warmed her from the inside. He asked for her number, called 2 days later, invited her for a walk along the riverfront, then to a cafe, then to the theater. Andrew never rushed, never pressured. He didn't bring extravagant bouquets, just a single daisy or a sprig of lilac wrapped in newspaper. Once, he showed up with a jar of homemade jam. A friend from the countryside brought it, he said. "Apricot, try it." The jam was thick, heavy with real fruit chunks, authentic, the kind that tasted like childhood. Of course, her friends had opinions. Ludmila, her coworker and closest friend, spoke cautiously. Ira, just, "Don't rush, take a closer look," but Svetlana, the one who had introduced them, waved it off. "What's there to inspect? He's a decent man, hardworking, no bad habits." Men like that are rare at our age. When Irina's mother met Andrew, she practically blossomed. He brought her a box of bird's milk chocolates and spent half an hour discussing seedling trays and gardening soil. Later, Zenaida Fyodorovna called her daughter, her voice glowing, "Irochka, finally. He's a good man, calm. That's exactly what you need. Don't let him slip away." 6 months later, Andrew proposed. No ring. No fancy restaurant, just the two of them in the kitchen one evening, steam rising from their tea. "Irina," he said quietly, "I feel good with you. I want it to stay that way. Let's make it official." She said yes. The registry office was almost empty, just the two of them, 2 witnesses, and a bouquet of white roses Andrew had bought from a small flower stand near the metro. After signing the papers, they celebrated modestly at a restaurant, just the 4 of them. Irina wore a dress she hadn't taken out of the closet in 5 years. It fit a little looser than before, but it still suited her. Andrew looked at her and said simply, "Beautiful." He moved into her apartment. He didn't have much, 2 suitcases and a box of books. He rented out his small 1-bedroom place on the outskirts of town. He slipped into Irina's life so naturally it felt as though he had always been there. He woke up before her, made coffee, fried eggs. If he was home in the evening, he met her after work. On weekends, they drove to the cottage. He fixed the fence, replaced the shed roof, even repainted her father's gazebo without asking. At first, Irina tensed. That gazebo had been her father's pride, built with his own hands. But Andrew painted it carefully, using the same shade, the same type of paint, not touching a single carved railing. "Wood needs protection," he explained calmly, "otherwise it'll rot in a couple of years." And she softened. He drove her mother to doctor's appointments. Zenaida Fyodorovna struggled with arthrosis in her knees. Getting around was painful. Before, Irina would leave work early, call taxis, rush and worry. Now Andrew handled it. "Zenaida Fyodorovna, tomorrow at 10 with the orthopedic specialist," he'd say firmly. "I'll pick you up at 9:30. Don't be late." Her mother adored him. Gold, not a son-in-law, she repeated every chance she got. The first 2 years passed smoothly, almost without a cloud. Irina caught herself smiling for no reason at all. The house was no longer silent. There was someone to tell about a ridiculous client, a new tomato variety, a funny moment at the grocery store. Andrew would listen, nod, sometimes joke. His humor was soft, a little old-fashioned, but she liked that. There was only one thing that unsettled her, just slightly. Money. More precisely, the lack of it coming from Andrew. He said he worked freelance, picked up project-based jobs, drafted designs for various companies, but in 2 years, Irina had never once seen a contract, not a single invoice. Money from him came rarely and in small amounts, $5,000 for groceries, $3,000 for gas. The real expenses, utilities, food, fuel, the country house, her mother's medication, rested squarely on Irina's shoulders. She earned well, close to $90,000 a month, and technically she managed, but something bitter lingered beneath the surface. One evening, she tried to talk about it. Carefully, gently, over dinner. "Andrew, I'm not blaming you, I just want to understand. Do you have any projects right now? You haven't mentioned work in a while." He didn't get offended, didn't raise his voice. He simply set down his fork, looked at her calmly, and answered in an even tone. Ira, the market's tough right now. Clients delay payments. New projects are rare. I'm looking. You know I'm not the kind of guy who just sits around. Then he smoothly changed the subject, asked about her quarterly report, offered to help if she needed anything. Irina didn't push. She told herself it happened. It wasn't easy for a man his age. Competition, pressure. She didn't want to become that wife who nags over every dollar. She earned enough. Andre helped around the house. The balance, uneven but stable, held. Then the third year began. At first, she didn't understand that something was wrong. The warning signs were quiet, almost invisible. One morning she woke up and couldn't get out of bed. Her body felt unbearably heavy, as if something unseen was pressing her down. She lay there for 10 minutes, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember what day it was. Finally, she forced herself upright and lowered her feet to the floor. The room swayed. There was a strange taste in her mouth, bitter, metallic. Andrea appeared in the doorway holding a cup of tea. Didn't sleep well? Drink this. I made you a blend. Lemon balm and motherwort. For your nerves. The tea was hot, sharp, fragrant with herbs. Irina sipped it slowly while Andrea sat on the edge of the bed, stroking her hand. How caring he is, she thought. Another man would have gone to the kitchen, turned on the TV. But he sits here, worries about me. A week later, it happened again, and the week after that. The morning weakness became routine, as if every night someone was draining her strength drop by drop. Her head spun, especially when she stood too quickly. Sometimes she caught herself unable to remember the previous evening. She would recall dinner, the tea, Andre saying something, and then nothing. A blank space. She would wake in bed, already in her pajamas, with the eerie feeling that time between dinner and morning had simply been cut out, like a missing scene from a film. She blamed exhaustion. End of the financial year. Reports. Audits. Too much work. 52 isn't 25, she told herself. The body gets tired. That's normal. Andre supported that explanation. He bought her vitamins, whole boxes with bright, reassuring labels, left a glass of water and 2 tablets on her nightstand, magnesium and B6. You need them every single evening. Without fail, he brewed herbal tea, watched to make sure she drank it. You work too much, he'd say at dinner, slicing bread for her. You need a break, maybe take some time off, we'll go to the country house, sit in the gazebo, get some fresh air. Irina nodded, thinking she was lucky. Not everyone had a husband who noticed when something was wrong, who stayed close, not with criticism, but with warm hands and a cup of tea. She didn't know yet that the tea was the problem. By the 5th month of these strange mornings, Irina barely recognized herself. A woman who for 23 years had never once been late to work now struggled just to leave the apartment. Every step felt heavy, as if her legs were wrapped in lead. She began forgetting simple things, where she put her car keys, whether she had locked the door, turned off the stove. One day she drove through a red light because she didn't see the signal. The driver coming toward her laid on the horn. Irina jolted and slammed the brakes so hard her purse flew off the passenger seat, spilling its contents across the floor. She sat there for several long minutes, gripping the steering wheel, waiting for her hands to stop shaking. After that, she stopped driving. She took the bus to work, even though she had always hated public transportation. And at work, things became much worse. Irene made a mistake in the quarterly report, mixed up the lines, and the discrepancy came to nearly 300,000 rubles. She didn't catch it herself. It was a young intern, Nastya, who was double-checking the numbers before submission. Nastya approached quietly, placed the printout on the desk, and whispered, Irene Pavlovna, could you please check this? Something doesn't add up. Irene stared at the numbers and didn't immediately see the problem. Then it hit her, and a chill ran through her. She had never made a mistake like this, not even in her first year when she was still fumbling through the entries. A week later, there was another error. Then her colleagues started exchanging glances behind her back. Irene noticed, though they tried to be discreet. Lyudmila, her neighbor in the adjacent office for 15 years, came in one day, closed the door, and sat across from her. Ear, she said, eyes full of unhidden concern. You haven't been sleeping at all, have you? Your face, it's gray. Your eyes, glassy. I'm just tired, Liud. Irene tried to smile, but her lips refused, twisting into a grimace. It's not fatigue. I've known you for 20 years. Not even after the divorce with Sergei did you look like this. Maybe? See a doctor? I did. They found nothing. Lyudmila drummed her fingers silently on the desk, then let it drop. Which doctors? Started with the local clinic, then a neurologist, and chronic fatigue. Prescribed vitamins. Lyudmila snorted skeptically, but dropped the subject, for now. 2 days later, Irene was summoned by Gennady Petrovich. His office was at the end of the corridor, spacious with heavy curtains and a perpetually running air conditioner. A half-empty bottle of mineral water sat on the desk, and a stack of documents lay there, which he usually signed without looking, but this time the papers were pushed aside. Gennady Petrovich leaned back in his chair, looking at Irene with an expression she had never seen from him before. Not anger. Not irritation. Something like confusion. Irene Pavlovna, he began, rubbing the bridge of his nose, you understand why I called you? I understand, she whispered, sinking into the chair across from him. 3 mistakes in a month. The last one almost went to the tax office. If Nastya hadn't caught it, he waved his hand. This isn't like you, at all. I'm not scolding you, I'm worried. Maybe you should get checked out, seriously, not our 5 minutes per patient clinic. You haven't been yourself lately. Irene nodded. What could she say? That she didn't understand what was happening? That she woke every morning feeling detached from her own body? That her memory was crumbling like wet sand? Take a few days off, he added, softer, not counting your vacation. Just rest. See someone competent. Irene went to the clinic. The district doctor, a young woman named Alyona Vitalyevna, listened, measured her blood pressure, pressed on her stomach. Blood pressure was low, 100/60, pulse weak. Possible anemia, Alyona suggested, sending her for a general blood test and a neurologist appointment. The neurologist, an older man with a weary face, had her walk in a straight line, extend her arms, touch her nose with her finger. She completed the tasks, though her fingers missed slightly, and she swayed while walking. The neurologist made notes, shone a light into her eyes, asked, Headaches? Sleep problems? Stress at work? Yes, stress, Irene admitted. See, he said, as if it explained everything. Chronic fatigue from nervous strain. Classic for your age. Magnesium, B vitamins, fresh air, and make sure to sleep well. Irene bought magnesium and vitamins at the nearest pharmacy. 3 weeks, exactly as the box instructed. Nothing changed. The heaviness in the mornings remained. Memory lapses grew more frequent. One day she found a pot of burnt buckwheat in the kitchen and couldn't remember putting it on the stove. Another day, she found her wet shoes by the door, though she was certain she hadn't left the apartment all evening. Fear crept in, not vague, abstract fear, real, sharp fear, fear that she was losing her mind. She was afraid that one morning she would wake up and not remember who she was, or worse, not wake up at all. She had lost almost 18 pounds. Her skirts hung loosely from her hips, her blazer draped off her shoulders like it belonged on a hanger. In the bathroom mirror, a stranger stared back at her, pale, hollow-cheeked, dark crescents under her eyes that no concealer could hide. Eventually, Irina stopped looking. She brushed her hair by touch alone. Andrei watched it all with a look of quiet concern. In the evenings, he would sit beside her on the couch, wrap an arm around her shoulders, and speak in a low, gentle voice. Maybe you should really think about early retirement. Why push yourself like this? Your health matters more. I'll find work. We'll manage somehow. What kind of work, Andrei? She asked one night, trying not to sound sharp, but exhaustion turned her voice dry. You've been looking for 2 years. I'll find something. A couple of serious projects are about to come through. Don't worry. He would stroke her hair, bring her a blanket, set a cup of herbal tea in front of her, the same blend he brewed every evening. Irina drank it because the tea was the only thing that seemed to calm her, even slightly. Afterward, sleep would come, heavy, dense, dreamless. And in the morning, she'd wake with a body that felt like lead and a mind wiped hollow. It was in the middle of that nightmare that Liedmila came into her office again. This time she didn't sit down. She stood by the door, arms crossed tightly over her chest, speaking with the firm resolve of someone who had been thinking for a long time and had finally made up her mind. Listen, 3 years ago, my sister Valya had something similar. Weakness, brain fog, memory like a sieve. She saw 10 doctors. Nobody found anything. They were practically ready to send her to a psychiatrist. Then she ended up with this old-school doctor, Viktor Semyonovich Kravtsov. He works at a small private clinic on Poplar Street, doesn't charge much. He figured it out in 2 visits. Turned out to be a thyroid issue everyone else had missed. She got treatment and was like new. Lyudmila placed a slip of paper with a phone number on Irina's desk. Irina stared at it. She wanted to say she was tired of doctors, tired of tests that showed nothing, tired of hearing everything looks normal. But she saw Lyudmila's eyes, serious, almost pleading, and said nothing. That evening, while Andrew was out, she called. A woman with a soft voice answered, introducing herself as the clinic administrator. She scheduled Irina for the day after tomorrow at 10 in the morning. Please bring all previous test results. If you have them, the woman added gently. The clinic was exactly as Lyudmila had described. Small, quiet, tucked deep inside a courtyard on Poplar Street. A 2-story beige brick building without flashy signs, just a modest plaque by the entrance, Medical Center Nadezhda. Private practice. Inside, it didn't smell like a hospital. It smelled like someone's apartment, wood, books, and a faint trace of lavender. 2 soft armchairs stood in the hallway beside a low table stacked with old magazines. On the wall hung a reproduction of Golden Autumn by Isaac Levitin, the one with the river and slender birch trees glowing in fall light. The administrator, a full-figured, middle-aged woman with glasses hanging from a chain, led Irina down the corridor to the last door. She knocked, opened it. Viktor Semyonovich, your patient is here. The office was small and felt untouched by time. A heavy dark oak desk stood in the center, its corners worn smooth. On it, a green-shaded desk lamp, a stack of medical files, a pen with a blue cap. To the right, a glass front cabinet filled with medical books, some so old their titles had faded. Behind the desk hung a yellow diploma in a frame. Next to it, several framed thank you letters from patients, and a small photograph, a young doctor in a white coat standing in front of a hospital entrance. Judging by the fashion and the faded tones, it had been taken in the early 80s. Viktor Semyonovich rose to greet her. He was well into his 70s, but he moved with steady assurance, not hurried, not frail, but deliberate, like a man who believed time worked for him, not against him. Lean, short, with a neatly trimmed gray beard, his thick horn-rimmed glasses sat slightly crooked on the bridge of his nose, giving the impression that he looked at the world from a subtle angle. His handshake was dry, light, and unexpectedly firm. "Please, Irina Pavlovna," he said calmly, gesturing to the chair. "Start from the very beginning." Irina told him everything about the morning weakness, the dizziness, the memory lapses, the mistakes at work, the weight loss, how she had stopped driving, how she had stopped looking at herself in the mirror. She spoke for nearly 20 minutes without stopping, and Viktor Semyonovich didn't interrupt once. He listened with his head slightly tilted, occasionally making notes, not on a computer, but in a small paper notebook, writing with a simple ballpoint pen. When she finished, he didn't comment right away. Instead, he began asking questions. And that was when Irina understood why Lyudmila had insisted so strongly that she see him. The questions were different, not "where does it hurt?" or "how are you sleeping?" "What do you eat for breakfast?" he asked. Usually a cheese sandwich, sometimes eggs. "Who cooks?" "My husband." "Most of the time, and dinner?" "Him as well?" "Or do you cook together?" "Usually him." "What do you drink before bed?" "Tea. An herbal blend. Andrew makes it." Viktor Semyonovich lifted one eyebrow slightly but said nothing. He wrote something down. "Are you taking any medications?" "Vitamins? Supplements?" "Magnesium and B6. And Andrew buys me some kind of multivitamins in yellow capsules. Says they're for immunity. Where are they stored?" In the kitchen, in the cabinet above the sink. Who else uses that cabinet? Well, both of us. That's where we keep the home medicine kit. Bandages, pain relievers, nasal drops. Viktor Semyonovich removed his glasses and wiped them slowly with a soft cloth from his coat pocket. Then he put them back on and looked at her directly. No smile. Irina Pavlovna, I want to order an expanded blood test for you. Not the basic one you've already done. A full panel with toxicology screening. She blinked. Toxicology? She repeated, surprised. Why? I don't use anything. I'm not suggesting that you do, he said calmly. I simply want to rule out every possibility. Your symptoms are not typical for ordinary chronic fatigue. I need a complete picture to understand what's happening. He handed her the referral form, filled out in small, neat handwriting. Tomorrow morning. Fasting. The lab is downstairs. Results in 3 days. Come back with them. She gave blood the next morning. The nurse, a middle-aged woman with warm, steady hands, found the vein easily, filled several tubes, taped cotton to the inside of her elbow. Keep pressure for 15 minutes, the nurse said. Irina sat obediently in the hallway, pressing the cotton to her arm, her thoughts racing. Why toxicology? What does he suspect? She felt uneasy, but beneath the anxiety, something new flickered, faint, fragile hope that someone might finally figure it out. The 3 days dragged. Andrei didn't notice anything unusual. Irina hadn't told him about her visit to Dr. Kravtsov. She couldn't even explain to herself why. She had simply stayed silent. In the evenings, she drank his tea. As always, in the mornings, she woke with the same crushing heaviness. On the 3rd day, Irina returned to the clinic. The receptionist handed her a sealed envelope with the results. She walked down the familiar corridor, knocked on the office door. Viktor Semyonovich greeted her standing up. He took the envelope, gestured for her to sit, then carefully opened it with a letter opener. Several stapled sheets slid out. He began to read. Irina watched his face change. First, concentration, then a slight tightening of his brow. He removed his glasses, wiped them, put them back on. Read again. The fingers holding the papers trembled. Irina Pavlovna, he said finally, and his voice sounded different now. Lower. More careful. Remind me, what is your married last name? Sorokina. A pause. Long. Heavy. He slowly placed the papers on the desk. The color drained from his face, not suddenly but gradually, as if someone had turned an invisible valve. Your husband wouldn't happen to be Andrei Sorokin? Her heart slammed so hard she felt the pulse in her throat. Yes. Why? He looked away. Out the window, where a poplar branch swayed behind the glass, 5 seconds passed. Maybe 10. Then he turned back to her. Listen to me very carefully, he said. These are your results. Look for yourself. He turned the pages toward her and pointed to a line in the middle. Irina leaned closer. She wasn't a doctor, but the form was clear. On the left, the name of the substance. On the right, the measured level. Further to the right, everything was normal. One line, however, was highlighted in red. Benzodiazepines detected. Concentration. Numbers followed, numbers that meant nothing to Irina. Below that, another red line with the name of a drug she had never heard of. What did this mean? The voice that answered was hoarse, almost a whisper. Viktor Semyonovich folded his hands on the desk and spoke carefully, each word measured, deliberate. It means that your body contains powerful psychotropic drugs, sedatives from the benzodiazepine group. These substances are prescribed strictly by doctors in tightly controlled doses. Long-term use produces exactly the symptoms you've described: drowsiness, sluggishness, memory lapses, confusion, and reduced concentration. Did anyone prescribe these to you? No. I don't take anything like that, are you sure? No doctor has ever prescribed you sleeping pills, tranquilizers, or sedatives? No. Only magnesium and vitamins. Viktor Semyonovich nodded, removed his glasses, and placed them on the desk. Without them, his eyes seemed smaller, older, weary, but still sharp, piercing. Then there is only one conclusion, he said. Someone is giving them to you without your knowledge. The silence in the office thickened, almost tangible. Irina could hear the ticking of a clock behind the wall, the rustle of a poplar branch brushing against the glass, the hollow, heavy pounding of her own heart as if it were trying to escape her chest. Viktor Semyonovich rose from his chair, walked to a glass-fronted cabinet, opened it, and pulled down a thin, light brown cardboard folder tied with strings from the top shelf. He returned to his seat, untied the strings, and opened it. Inside were a few sheets of paper. "I need to tell you something," he said, and his voice carried a tension she hadn't heard before, almost a hint of guilt. "About 8 months ago, a man came to see me. He called himself Andre. He didn't give his last name, around 45, maybe a little older, fit with gray eyes, calm, polite. He said his wife was in a serious state, nervous breakdowns, panic attacks, insomnia. He asked what medications could be given to calm her down. That was his exact word, calm her down. I looked through my records and gave standard, mild recommendations, over-the-counter sedatives, motherwort, valerian, melatonin at night. I explained that serious medications could only be prescribed by a doctor after proper examination. He left, but returned 2 weeks later. This time, his questions were different. He asked specifically, what dosage will make someone calmer, to prevent anxiety, arguments, and what side effects might occur with long-term use. He was interested in side effects, memory loss, confusion, sluggishness, loss of willpower. He asked as if making a shopping list. I grew concerned. I explained carefully that these drugs cannot be given without a doctor's prescription, that it's a criminal offense. He listened, nodded, and left. He never came back. I didn't know his last name or who his wife was, but I remembered his face. And now, when you mentioned the name Sorokin, I remembered one detail. He paid by bank card. Our terminal prints the cardholder's name. I glanced at it at the time. It flashed before me. Andrei Sorokin. I didn't think much of it then. He paused. Irina sat motionless, her hands resting on her knees, numb. In her foggy mind, clarity hit her like a spotlight in a dark room. She saw everything, every evening tea, every yellow capsule, every warning she had ignored. Each detail screamed at her. "You mean my husband?" she whispered, unable to finish. Her throat constricted. Viktor Semyonovich spoke slowly, each word precise, like a surgeon weighing the movement of a scalpel. "I mean this. Your blood contains drugs no doctor prescribed. You claim you haven't taken them knowingly. 8 months ago, your husband came to me asking questions that directly relate to the properties and effects of these drugs. I am a doctor, not an investigator. You can draw your own conclusions, but I strongly urge you to take this seriously. Very seriously." He handed her a copy of the results form. "This is yours. Keep it somewhere safe." Then, lowering his voice just slightly, even though the office was empty except for them, he added, "Be careful. If what we're thinking is true, don't show it. Not yet. Protect yourself first." Irina took the form. Her fingers trembled, and the paper crumpled slightly in her hands. She stood up, wanted to say something, thank him, ask what to do next, but the words wouldn't come. Viktor Semyonovich seemed to understand. He simply nodded and said, "You have my number. Call anytime." She left the office, walking down the corridor, past a Leviton reproduction, past the soft chairs, past the receptionist who murmured something to her. She didn't hear it. She pushed open the front door and stepped onto the porch. The air was sharp, autumn cold, carrying the scent of wet leaves and smoke. A car passed nearby, a building door banged, a child laughed. The world carried on, unaware. Inside, everything in Irina collapsed silently, as if the foundation had been pulled from beneath a house. She stood on the clinic's porch, clutching the folder to her chest. Her first instinct was to rush home, throw the form in his face, scream, demand answers. Her body moved toward the bus stop, but something, maybe the part of her mind finally clear of the chemical fog, stopped her. If Andrei realized she knew, he would erase everything, wash the tea mug, toss the wrappers, wipe the search history from his phone. Then all she'd have left was this sheet of results and the words of an elderly doctor, which could easily be dismissed as coincidence. She pulled out her phone and dialed Lyudmila. Her voice cracked. She had to clear her throat. "Can you come get me?" "I'm near the clinic, by the poplar tree." "What happened?" Lyudmila's sharp intuition caught something in her tone. Just come. I'll explain in the car. 20 minutes later, Lyudmila arrived in her old blue Skoda. Irina climbed into the passenger seat, slammed the door, and stared silently ahead for a few seconds. Then she began to speak, recounting everything: the tests, the benzodiazepines, Andrei's visits to Kravtsov, his questions about dosages and side effects. She spoke evenly, without tears, almost mechanically, like she used to read debt reports in meetings. Lyudmila listened without interrupting. Only her knuckles on the steering wheel turned white, though the car remained stationary. When Irina fell silent, Lyudmila didn't react with shock or disbelief. She turned the key in the ignition and said firmly, "Don't go home. Come to me." Irina spent the night at Lyudmila's. She slept in the guest room on a worn couch under a plaid blanket scented faintly of detergent and cat hair. Lyudmila's old ginger cat, Kuzma, immediately claimed her feet. She called Andrei to say she'd stayed at a friend's, drank some wine, and couldn't drive. He replied calmly, "Okay, rest. I'll watch TV here." The familiar, caring voice of her husband rang hollow. Lying in the dark, listening to Lyudmila clattering dishes in the kitchen, Irina replayed the last few months in her head: the herbal tea every night, the yellow immune-boosting capsules, his constant warnings about overwork, hints of early retirement. Every word, every gesture, every act she had once accepted as care now formed a terrifying new picture, and it made her want to scream. The next day, Irina returned to the apartment. No Lyudmila waited downstairs with the engine running. Andrei had left for his project meetings, as he called the hours-long absences that usually lasted 3 to 4 hours. Irina had time. She started in the kitchen, opening the upper cabinet where the household medicine box sat, a plastic container with a lid filled with a messy mix of adhesive bandages, a thermometer, packs of painkillers, and cold drops. Next to it was a jar of yellow capsules. Irene turned it over in her hands. The label was ordinary, pharmaceutical, a multivitamin and mineral complex. She opened the lid and poured a few capsules into her palm. Standard pills, smooth, unmarked. She slipped 2 of them into a small plastic bag and then turned to the tea. On the shelf near the stove were 3 metal tins: black tea, green tea, and an herbal blend, the same one Andrew brewed for her every evening. The tin was opaque, with a flip-top lid. She opened it and peered inside. The top layer looked normal: dry leaves, stems, bits of flowers, a common herbal mix. She dipped a spoon deeper and stirred. At the bottom, something pale glimmered. She scooped up another spoonful and noticed it. Among the brown and green fragments, a fine white powder rested near the base, not in clumps but evenly scattered, as if it had been carefully blended into the herbs. It didn't look like tea at all. Her hands began to tremble. Irene transferred a portion of the mixture from the bottom of the tin into the zippered plastic bag she had brought with her. Then she closed the tin and returned it to its place. Next came the entryway: coats, jackets, shoes. She checked the pockets of Andrew's winter coat, a dark blue down jacket hanging on the end hook. Nothing in the right pocket. In the left, a crumpled piece of paper. She unfolded it on her palm. A pharmacy receipt from pharmacy on Lennon Street, dated 4 months earlier. Item: phenozepam tablets, 1 mg, quantity 50. Price: 420 rubles. Cash payment. Phenozepam. Irene wasn't a doctor, but the name rang a bell. She had seen it online once when searching for sleep aids and stumbling upon information about prescription medications. A benzodiazepine, the very class of substances that had shown up in her blood tests. She slipped the receipt into her bag and moved on to the next room, the space Andrew used as an office, a small room once intended as a child's bedroom. She had imagined it as a nursery years ago, but life had chosen a different path. Now it held a desk, a chair, and a narrow bookshelf. Irene pulled open the top drawer. Pens, paper clips, an old flash drive, a notebook. The second drawer next. Beneath a stack of papers and random printouts, likely just for appearance, lay a sheet of printer paper. She pulled it free. The headline read, "Signs of Incapacity. How to Apply for Legal Guardianship Over a Relative. Step-by-Step Guide." A printout from the internet. The text was long, 3 pages, but the first page was enough. Certain phrases leapt out at her. A person who, due to mental disorder, cannot understand the meaning of their actions. Application to the court for recognition of incapacity. Appointment of a guardian. The guardian manages the property of the ward. That was it. The motive became clear. Not money in an envelope, not stolen earrings from a jewelry box, something bigger. The apartment in the city center, the vacation house, the savings, everything Irene had worked for over 30 years. Andrew wasn't trying to kill her. That would be complicated and risky. He was aiming for something simpler, to reduce her to dependence, to a state where she couldn't work, think, or make decisions. Then the court, the medical paperwork, the guardianship, and all her assets under his control. She photographed the printout with her phone and returned it beneath the other documents, closing the drawer. Then she left the room. That evening, she came home as usual. Andrew was in the kitchen, frying potatoes and humming softly. He turned and smiled. "Hey, you okay?" "Yeah, thanks. Had a nice visit." "Good. Dinner's almost ready." "Sit down. I'll make you some tea." "Okay." She took a seat. Andrew placed a plate of potatoes and a cutlet in front of her, then a cup of herbal tea. The familiar scent of herbs hit her, and for a second she almost gagged, but she swallowed it down and forced a smile. She picked up the cup and took a small sip, just enough to appear normal. Andrew turned back to the stove, washing the skillet. Irene stood quickly, pretending to rinse her hands at the sink, and in one smooth motion poured the tea down the drain. She ran the water to wash it away and returned to the table. "Delicious tea," she said. "Just brewed it fresh. And there's some Melissa specially for you." "Thanks, Andrewush." She ate her potatoes, watching his back, broad shoulders under a simple home t-shirt, the neat curve of his neck, the confident way his hands moved while washing the dishes. The man she had let into her home, into her life, the man who for more than 2 years had been methodically, day after day, slipping poison into her tea, watching her fade, and smiling. That night, Irina didn't sleep. She lay with her eyes open, listening to Andre's even breathing beside her, thinking, How didn't I see it? How didn't I feel it? And then she remembered. She couldn't. He had chemically shut down her mind. What she had taken for care was poison. Every cup of tea, every capsule, every gentle word, part of a plan. The next morning, Irina woke at 6. For the first time in 6 months, her head was clear. No heaviness, no fog, no leaden legs. She lay there, feeling her body for the first time, every muscle, every joint. The sensation was so strange, so foreign, that she spent several minutes just breathing, getting used to it. One evening without his tea, and already the difference was stark. Through acquaintances of Ludmila, Irina found a lawyer. Nina Arturovna Levchenko met her in a small office on the 3rd floor of a business center, a secretary at the desk, a framed license on the wall, and a kitten calendar that somehow didn't match the professional tone of the place. Nina Arturovna was about 50, short, solidly built, with a short haircut and a sharp gaze from beneath heavy eyelids. She specialized in family law and crimes against the person. Irina laid out everything before her, the lab results from Kroftsov Clinic, a little packet of powder from the tea can, the receipt for phenazepam, a printed photo of the guardianship document. Nina Arturovna spread the items on the desk like a solitaire game and studied them silently for 10 minutes. Then she looked up. "Irina Pavlovna, this isn't a family quarrel. This is systematic poisoning. Article 111 of the Criminal Code of Russia, intentional infliction of serious harm to health. If the expert analysis shows doses increased over time, and from your description of symptoms this is likely, it could escalate under Article 30 in connection with Article 105, attempted murder." She tapped her finger on the printed photo. "And here's the motive. He wanted to declare you incapacitated, become your guardian, and take control of your property. Apartment, country house, bank accounts. The scheme isn't new, but it's usually hard to prove. You're lucky, you have toxicology results, physical evidence, and a witness who is a doctor." Nina Arturovna helped Irina file a police report properly, attaching all materials, referencing the relevant statutes, and including the lab results. At the same time, Irina had an independent examination done at a state lab, giving blood at another facility to prevent challenges to the results. They confirmed the benzodiazepines at the same level. The herbal mix from the can was sent for chemical analysis. A week later, the conclusion arrived. crushed phenazepam, and traces of another sedative. The police launched an investigation. Irina continued living with Andrei. The lawyer insisted, if you leave now, he'll get suspicious. While the investigation is ongoing, behave as usual. Don't drink the tea, don't swallow the capsules, but don't show it. Those were the hardest 2 weeks of Irina's life, sitting at the same table with the person poisoning her, smiling through it. She learned to pour the tea discreetly down the sink, to hide capsules in her pocket, and toss them in the trash on her way to work. Each morning, her mind grew clearer, and with that clarity came a cold, concentrated, almost businesslike rage. Irina counted the days. The investigation moved fast. It turned out that Andrei Sorokin wasn't an engineer at all. He had no diploma. For the past 10 years, he'd survived on odd jobs, loader, security guard, standby driver. He had accumulated debts totaling $1.5 million, payday loans, credit cards, money owed to acquaintances. The prescription for fenosepam had been issued by Oleg Dmitrievich Nekayev, a feldsher at the district clinic, who charged 5,000 rubles to write prescriptions for controlled medications without seeing the patient. And then came another detail that stole Irina's breath. Andrei had been married before her. His first marriage ended 6 years ago. His ex-wife, Natalia, had moved to Krasnodar immediately after the divorce. The investigator contacted her, and she spoke. For the last 1.5 years of their marriage, she had suffered the same symptoms: weakness, memory lapses, inability to focus. Doctors found nothing. She had only been saved because her sister noticed something was wrong and took her away for a month. Away from Andrei, away from his teas and vitamins, Natalia recovered in 3 weeks. She divorced him by proxy, left, and never returned. She hadn't reported him to the police. She was afraid no one would believe her. Andrei was arrested at 7 a.m. He was just stepping out of his building, jacket on, backpack slung over his shoulder, walking somewhere on his routine errands. Irina watched from the kitchen window, standing behind the curtain. 2 plainclothes officers approached him at the doorway. One flashed his badge, the other said something. Andrei paused. She saw his shoulders twitch briefly, almost imperceptibly. Then he straightened and walked with them to the car. He didn't look back. Irina stepped away from the window and sat at the kitchen table. In front of her sat an empty cup. For the first time in a long while, there was no tea on the table. The trial was set 9 months later. All that time, Irina lived as though she were learning to walk again, not literally, though her body had to recover too. Months of chemical exposure had left her body fragile, and recovery was slow. In the first weeks after Andrei's arrest, she slept 12 hours at a stretch. But this was a different kind of sleep, alive, filled with fleeting dreams, nothing like the deadening void the pills had trapped her in. She awoke feeling rested. Her memory returned gradually. First small things: where her keys were, what she had for breakfast, what she'd said to a colleague yesterday. Then bigger details: phone numbers, dates, work formulas she had once recalled automatically, now painfully retrieved while staring at the ceiling. She started seeing a psychologist, an older woman named Tatiana Viktorovna, whose small office glowed with soft yellow light and smelled faintly of orange oil. At first, Irina didn't trust the sessions. She sat, arms crossed, giving monosyllabic answers, but Tatiana Viktorovna never rushed her. By the 3rd session, Irina suddenly began to speak and couldn't stop for 2 hours. She spoke not about Andrei, but about herself, how she had spent 10 years fearing loneliness, craving someone beside her so desperately that she overlooked the obvious. Shame burned inside her, not for him, but for herself, for her blindness. She returned to work after 3 months. Colleagues knew, rumors spread fast, especially since the case had hit local news, even if names weren't mentioned. But no one pried. Nastya, the same intern who had once caught a mistake in a report, silently placed a small pot of violets on Irina's desk, exactly like the ones on her own windowsill at home. How she knew was a mystery. Irina looked at the flower, then at Nastya. Her lips trembled, but she controlled herself. She nodded. "Thank you, Nastya. I'll put it by the monitor." On her first day back, Gennady Petrovich called her in, not to talk about work. He sat across from her, twirling a pen in his hands. "Irina Pavlovna, I owe you an apology," he said. Back then I pressured you about the reports. I should have done it differently. I should have done it another way. Irina shook her head. You couldn't have known, Gennady Petrovich. No one could. Ludmila grew even closer after that. She called every evening, not with the usual empty questions like "How are you?" that already made Irina wince, but with ordinary, everyday things. Cheese is on sale at the store. Want me to pick some up? Kuzma climbed the wardrobe again and won't stop yelling. Can you imagine? Listen, I started a new series. Total nonsense, but I got hooked. It was exactly what she needed. Simple human normality, warm and free of hidden tension. On weekends, they went to the Dacha together, and Ludmila, who in all her life had never held a shovel, dug clumsily at the flower beds, complained about mosquitoes, and brewed tea the ordinary way, black tea from a bag. Irina watched her fussing with the kettle and sometimes caught herself thinking that this was what real care looked like. No double meaning, no trap beneath the surface. Her mother found out last of all. Irina had hesitated for a long time before telling her she wanted to protect her, but when the case reached court, hiding it became impossible. She went to Zenaida Fyodorovna's house on Sunday, bringing cabbage pies from the bakery her mother loved. They sat in the kitchen, drinking tea, real tea, no additives, and Irina spoke quietly, carefully choosing her words so as not to frighten her. But her mother understood at once. Her face seemed to shrink, aging in an instant. Her lips trembled. She was silent for a long time, and then tears came, quiet tears, the kind older women cry when something inside breaks, soundless except for the slight shaking of her shoulders. It's my fault, she whispered, crumpling a napkin. I told you he was a good man. Calm. I pushed you toward him. Mom. Irina took her hands, dry, warm, the veins slightly swollen with age. Mom, he deceived everyone. Not just you, me, our friends, Svetlana, who introduced us. That's what he does. It wasn't your fault. Zenaida Fyodorovna shook her head and kept crying. Irina stayed beside her, holding her hands, waiting. When her mother finally quieted, Irina poured fresh tea, slid a pie toward her, and said, It's over, Mom. It's all behind us now. I'm fine. Really. The trial took place in the regional courthouse, in a courtroom on the third floor, official and stark, with wooden benches and the state emblem on the wall. There were few people present. Irina with her lawyer, the investigator, a couple of local journalists. Viktor Semenovich Kravtsov arrived in a dark gray suit of an old-fashioned cut, the tie neatly knotted. He testified calmly, sticking strictly to the facts. He described both visits from Andrew and the questions he had asked. The judge listened carefully. Natalia, Andrew's ex-wife from Krasnodar, had come to testify as well, a small, thin woman in her 40s with short hair. She was nervous, twisting the strap of her bag, speaking in a low voice. She told everything about the weakness, the memory lapses, how her sister had taken her from the house and it took 3 weeks for her to come back to herself, how she had been afraid to go to the police. The room went silent when she finished. The judge wrote notes without looking up. Andrew sat behind the glass partition in handcuffs. Irina forced herself to look at him just once. He hadn't changed much. Same gray eyes, same steady, attentive gaze. When it was his turn to speak, his voice remained calm. I gave my wife medication out of concern, he said. She wasn't sleeping well. She was anxious. I wanted to help. The words were level and convincing. For a second, Irina almost heard the old version of him, the man who had once sat beside her on the bed and stroked her hand. But only for a second. The verdict, 6 years of imprisonment under the relevant criminal statute. The marriage was dissolved. Compensation for moral damages was awarded to the victim. Irina stepped out of the courthouse in April. The air was warm, carrying the scent of wet asphalt and blooming lilacs. Ludmila was waiting by the car. She rarely smoked, only when she was nervous. Seeing Irina, she tossed her cigarette into the trash and walked over. So, 6 years? Ludmila nodded and hugged her. They stood silently on the courthouse steps as people passed by, wrapped up in their own lives. Life didn't go back to how it had been after the trial. It became something else entirely. Irina didn't realize it all at once. She noticed it gradually, day by day. She could sit behind the wheel again without fear at intersections. She could open a report and spot mistakes instantly. She could fall asleep at night and wake in the morning remembering everything from the day before. Sometimes she visited Viktor Semyonovich, not as a patient, but just to see him. He would brew her ordinary black tea in that old tin teapot on the windowsill in his office. They would sit and talk about everything, weather, books, how the city was changing. One day, as he stirred sugar into her cup, he said quietly, "You know, Irina Pavlovna, a doctor isn't the one who just treats. A doctor is the one who sees what others miss. I was lucky I saw you in time," he added. Irina sat in the chair across from him, holding the warm cup, watching a poplar branch sway outside, the same branch she had noticed on her first visit when the world had still been wrapped in fog. The poplar had turned green, and a sparrow perched there, preening its feathers. For the first time in a long while, she smiled, not bitterly, not guardedly, just smiled. Thank you for listening to this story. You've been watching the channel Twists of Fate. Sorry for any mistakes. Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe. M.